here we are. This is Sex Love Psychedelics, and I'm your host, Dr. Kat, bringing you psychosexual conversations that will leave you intellectually turned on and hungry for more. I remember growing up, for me, I'm from rural town, Missouri. Catholic family, Catholic school, very, I would say my family was probably the only liberal family for miles. So I did grow up with parents who supported the rights of reproduction, but then going into school and getting all these messages around how this is a sin, how that you're going to hell, how this is bad. And as a child, feeling very confused by that. And then seeing how that's perpetuated in TV shows where women going to get abortion are fraught between this moral, this moral shame, or this is a traumatic event for them. So I remember growing up with that. And then when I first started being a therapist, I think I was 23 and had a client who had had an abortion. And I asked her, I felt the feeling of trauma and sadness in my body. And I asked her, oh, that must have been painful. And she looked at me and she goes, no. And I realized in that moment, my own perception, I had to sit and do my own therapy around that. Like, where did this come from that I projected that onto her, that it was something that was traumatic? So can you speak to that, or can you speak to how we would get to that point, or see those perspectives?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that your experience is really common. I think that the country, for so many reasons that we could talk about for a whole episode, about kind of the puritanical roots of this country and our hesitance or our fraught relationship in general with sexuality, and the fact that we are obsessed with sex, with advertising and certain aspects of pop culture, but then we also can't talk about sex, and we kind of squash conversations around sex, and we make it bad, or the religious narrative, or what's become political narrative, is that every time you engage in sex, it must result in procreation, because that's the will. And so I just think that your experience is really common, and that so many, especially people with uteruses, women in this country, have to have that moment where it shifts for them, where they recognize all of the ways that they were trained, raised, programmed growing up are worthy of a bit of questioning of, do I still agree with these old feelings, these old sensibilities that having an abortion is shameful, that I did something wrong, right? Like, the narrative in the movement right now is really to proclaim abortion as normal. And there's even a movement to pluralize abortion, so that we're not just talking about everyone deserves to have one abortion, but that if you happen to have multiple abortions, that's normal too. It's really moving away from even previous language around that abortion should be rare. That's no longer, we're moving past that into, again, understanding abortion as one aspect of this spectrum of your reproductive life cycle, of your reproductive journey in life. If you are in a body with a uterus, these things may arise and be your life will present different experiences. You will have encounters, you will have relationships, you will choose to have children or not have children. And at any given point, you may have a choice to make, or a set of options to navigate. And abortion needs to be integrated into that journey, so that it's not isolated over here, having to be sought out through a network of independent clinics, through bold providers that are stepping up to provide care. Like, the call right now is to truly integrate abortion as a human right, as basic health care, as something that at any point someone might want, need, seek. And with that, I think comes the breakdown of old stigma and
Yeah.
old siloing, right? Um, that you allow space for, like you described with the patient, that the experience to be exactly what it was. For some people, it might have been a challenge or sad or scary. For some people, it might have been no big deal. In fact, they might have just thought about it as getting their period back.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they didn't even think of it as an abortion. That's another
Mm-hmm.
conversation that's happening right now, is maybe it's just about taking these pills when your period is late. And there's actually a rise in interest and a provision right now of pills in advance from telehealth providers that are offering that up to patients in the US because of the fraught situation. They're saying, this is a really common practice in medicine to just give a medication in case you might need it. So
Mm-hmm.
we're going to offer pills in advance so that they're in your medicine cabinet and that
Yeah.
decision is even more available to you. So yeah, I really appreciate sharing that space with you of trauma-informed therapy and of thinking about what might be a part of someone's experience that they need to process later, and how might things be shifting and evolving as we open up the cultural conversation around what is an abortion, who gets to have an abortion, can we normalize it, can we help people heal, can we help
Mm-hmm.
people have all these options available to them, so that it's just a part of their journey.
Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that more too. We're seeing more people sharing their stories very openly and very, very vulnerably. I will highlight that.
Yeah,
It's vulnerable to say this, knowing that the culture outside won't necessarily receive you in a positive light. But I do think that that's helpful in re-narrating this for us. It's giving us new reference points to understand what the variety of experiences that are out there.
definitely. And that's where we see a substantial opportunity right now to introduce more and more stories around the abortion pill experience and the
Mm-hmm.
self-managed abortion experience, because it's something that is still relatively unknown or unfamiliar in the US. Many tens of thousands of people self-manage every year, if not hundreds of thousands. It's hard to have that data because of the nature of it being a self-managed choice and activity, but we believe it's really more important than ever, as these states pass unjust bans, that people understand that might be an option for them, and that if there's more stories out in the ether about what is that experience, what can you expect, what does it mean to self-manage at home? How long is it going to last? Is it painful? All of these kind of basic questions are being answered more and more often, both by public health and medical resources, as well as by movies and TV shows. And I personally think all of it is important. It's important for these stories to be out there so that we understand what it is we're talking about, and that it just becomes known as well as available. And so that's our part of our campaign for the last 6 years has been recognizing, again, the transformative potential of abortion pills in an individual's hands, and then recognizing what needs to shift, what needs to open up in order for it to be more part of the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
Who can we invite to consider this option as they tell stories, or consider this option as they share out information? How can we sort of help it exist in the mainstream, so that people know it exists, whether or not they need it? It's out there, and it's got so much more power in giving someone the ability to self-determine their pregnancy outcomes, giving someone the ability to really have autonomy over their body. It's
Yeah.
no longer within medical systems. It's no longer wrapped up in politics. It's really, again, kind of moving the locus of control back to the hands of the individual, and making sure that they have safe, supported resources to know whether this is the thing for them, whether that's a medical hotline like the M&A hotline, or the repro legal helpline that's helping someone understand their legal risk in any
Mm-hmm.
given situation. And so, yeah, part of the new stories that we would love to see and we would love to hear told have to do with incorporating the self-managed option so that it's really familiar to folks, because
Ah,
it is
I
all
love
around
that.
the world.
Well, that was fun. Thanks for tuning in, lovers. And if you want to experience more ecstasy and sexual liberation, head over to sexlovepsychedelics.com and learn about how you can join me for any one of my online or live events. And while you're there, grab my free guide on sex and psychedelics. Remember, this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please contact your healthcare provider and local law before pursuing any of the products or psychedelics discussed. And one final note here. I make this show specifically for you. If you're loving the show, then be sure to leave me a review in iTunes or Spotify to let me know. Happy to be here and happy to serve. I'll see you next time on Sex Love Psychedelics.